All right, Colin. So check this out. The pandemic has affected commercial real estate, I'm sure, because I know lots of people who have businesses.
Right.
And they have office space, and then now that they were able to still run their businesses without having office space, they're like, well, I don't need to go back to this, right? So, maybe even having a meeting once or twice a month in person. So how do you think that the pandemic has affected commercial real estate?
Yeah, so I mean, commercial real estate is a broad term, right? There's apartments, in terms of like, when I learned about commercial real estate, you kind of learn from like the lowest amount of risk to the highest amount of risk.
Okay.
So apartments are, I would say, the lowest risk because everyone needs to live somewhere.
Right.
Obviously, there's risk within that too. So, but that's right. It's less dense. Density is the key. So the more dense, the more safe.
Mm-hmm.
So and the more expensive.
Yeah.
So apartments are the least risk, and then retail. Usually a lot of people would say retail, strip centers or, stores, shops, shops out front here.
Yeah.
So retail is the second.
Second is retail.
Yeah, and then
I remember when during what they call the recession, I remember all those shops
box shops,
on Melrose Avenue
shut down.
It was like a ghost town,
right?
Going through there. So
right.
That's what you mean by
yeah. So retail, exactly. So that would be retail, and then office would be the next.
Office space,
like shooting in an office, or like where we are today, an office.
Yeah.
And then the other major type would be industrial. That would be the riskier. This was when I learned about commercial real estate 20 years ago.
Right.
Now I think the dynamics have shifted
a lot,
pretty dramatically, because retail and office are both very risky, and I wouldn't put them that close really to apartments. Apartments are very conservative.
Right.
So there's a lot of risk because of the internet, because of Amazon, everything. Retail's struggling, obviously, from what you saw.
Right.
Now office is getting hurt, right?
The pandemic.
Because of the pandemic.
There's
no need to go back in. So what are they going to do?
Yeah, what
right?
are they going to do?
There's lots of cities with 20-story buildings that are going to be sitting vacant. Yeah. So what they'll do eventually is they'll turn them into condos or apartments. That's that will eventually happen as long as there's demand in those places, which is what they sort of did in downtown Los Angeles. Is you had all these industrial buildings, these lofts, and they turned them into apartments, right? Exactly. Or condos or whatever it is. So over time they'll do that. The other thought is that they'll try to make offices more luxurious. That's in the major cities. They're going to do that. They're going to try to entice people to come back in with a great restaurant or a dry cleaner or a gym, and they're going to try to make it all within a building so that it gets people a reason to kind of come back into the office.
Nice.
But it's going to be,
that sounds expensive.
It is expensive.
That sounds expensive. If I got an office space that's just kind of sitting there, in order for me to fill that office space, I'm going to now have to add in some kind of cool gym, a really nice kind of restaurant, maybe a well-known chef or whatever. I have to add all these other accoutrements in there just to get somebody to fill the space. Absolutely. And that sounds expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be expensive, and it's a risk. It's not a guarantee. It's still, people could go, you know what, I don't care about that chef. I want to stay in my pajamas.
Yeah.
So the risk is there, and time will tell. Studies will show over the next few years how important it is for people to come in the office. Obviously a lot of businesses were thriving at home.
Yeah.
So employers were happy. There's no commute. There's no water cooler talk.
Right.
There's less chances for any kind of employee conflict because they're not in the same place. That's a huge risk. It's just things that can happen in the workplace. So there's a lot of benefits to not having people all together. So
I want to throw this out there, and you tell me how this kind of adjusts to it. I like to take care of my body. I like to go to the gym. Okay, I have a pretty good membership. I won't necessarily say what gym it is, but since the pandemic, obviously gyms shut down.
Right.
My garage is a scary place. It's in my garage, a scary place. It's like it's Hagrid wouldn't even go in there. It's just scary. But I bought myself a treadmill.
Right.
Eventually got myself a bench and some weights and blah, blah, and I had myself
Right.
the essentials. And now that the pandemic is open back up, my gym is trying to charge me money, and I went in and I shut it down.
Sure.
Because, well, first of all, I don't have to talk. There's always that one person, I want to say one guy, but it could be a girl, but usually it's been, my luck has been always men that have wanted to, like, you know, talk to me while
The whole time,
You
right.
know, the whole time.
Right.
I gotta get, you know,
Sure.
with those reps, you gotta get it in there.
Yeah,
blah, blah,
get
blah.
it.
So now I can go into my dusty ass gym and get my workout in, and I don't have to pay the gym,
Right.
my gym, and I'm done, and it's convenient. I
Yeah.
can do it anytime I want
Right,
to.
right.
I can do it in between my Zoom
Sure.
calls or classes or whatever
Absolutely.
the case is, and it's just like that. So is there some kind of analogy to me becoming, you know, my own gym
Yeah.
to commercial real estate?
Yeah, I think that that's what's going to happen with most things with businesses. I think that there's going to be less people going in. Now, listen, there's some businesses that are really probably hurting because of that. There's some creativity being lost, right? There's probably, you mentioned Steve Jobs, probably, are all those great ideas, would they have been created remotely? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? That's the unknown factor. So I think it's going to be, it's not going to be as consistent. We're going to see what's going to happen over the next 5 years, but I definitely would be nervous to if I owned a lot of Class A or Class B office.
Right,
I would
okay.
be concerned.
Now let me ask you this. Do you feel personally that you are more creative when you're working in your own solitude and environment, or do you like to work with people and you feel like it's
Right.
actually better for you?
If I'm home and my kids are not screaming, I can be very creative. But I have 3 young kids and it can be very loud, which I think everybody's going through,
Yeah.
you know, just having that noise. I like being around people. I like it, but I also think, you know, 1 to 2 days a week with people, then a few days from home is going to be fine. And I think that's where we're going to go. That's where I think we're going to go. That's where I'm going to go with you know, our businesses. So,
We're leading from commercial real estate. You mentioned apartments, and then it got me down to like a fourplex or a duplex, and then it got me down to the traditional single family home. And most of us are taught that, you know, you should buy a home, invest in that home, and that's how you kind of gain some kind of wealth, generational wealth. What is your opinion about individuals, you know, looking to buy single-family homes as an investment, as opposed to like commercial real estate or even rental properties?
it's not a good investment. I don't think any homes are a good investment for a number of reasons. Number one, the only reason to buy a home is to set your rent or your mortgage, because over time it will go up. So you're basically just hedging your bet against inflation. So if your mortgage is $2,500 a month and you lock that in, when inflation continues to rise, and I think inflation is between 8 and 10%, you're locking in a very affordable rate, and hopefully your income goes up. So that's really the only reason. Single-family residents are not good investments for a number of reasons, because just in terms of the risk, if you have one bad tenant in that extra unit and that tenant stays in there in 6-8 months, doesn't pay, destroys the place, you're spending a lot of time, a lot of money on something that has a lower chance of return. It's much better to have multiple units than to have one unit if you're going to invest in commercial real estate. So a duplex or fourplex or larger, just the amount of time, effort, and your safety. Because if you have a 10 unit, you have a few tenants move out, you still got other tenants kind of paying rent. So single family home is not a great investment. And also doesn't allow for a lot of, like right now is a great example. There's probably a lot of people that bought a house a year or two ago that maybe can't move for whatever reason, and because they're locked in with this thing, and their company said you don't have to live in New York, you don't have to live in California, but they're kind of stuck. You don't want to be stuck, so you got to buy in a place that you think you're going to be for a while, right? You got to be happy there, you got to be there for a while, because there's a lot of costs coming in and out, brokers, fees, transaction fees, there's all that stuff you have to pay. When you finally buy and you settle, you want to be in a place you're going to be for a while, and you're locking in that payment.
Now, from looking at the entire country, places like New York, San Francisco, LA,
Yeah.
we're kind of different here. You know what I mean? If you get locked in here, you're kind of locked in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, do you have any advice for somebody, for those of you that are not in the major cities like that want to buy a single family home or something like that? Does some of that change for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about flexibility. If someone wants the flexibility to be able to move, you want to rent, right? And there's all the other costs that you don't have to think about, which is the roof, the plumbing, it does give you that flexibility. And I know a number of people that rent and they just focus on their investments, with the extra money they have, and they don't want to deal with that day-to-day of owning. There's a lot of work involved with the house, so they just don't want to deal with that, so they focus on that. And I think that's okay. In the long term, they probably will eventually buy and want to lock in that rate that I mentioned. But having flexibility when you're building your career or your business, or you don't have time to focus on it, is really important, I believe. So a lot of people beat themselves up because they don't own a place, and I think the timing will be there.
Yeah.
And you don't want to rush it, because you want to stay there 10 years plus.
Yeah,
in a
exactly.
house or a condo.
Well, I think that's really good advice, because I know a lot of millennials and Gen Zers that are out there, and it feels like, well, your value of a person, like your measure of success is if you get a home. And here in Los Angeles and other big cities, you're going to drop $1.2 million just to get into a home, and the kind of money that you have to make at being that young, it's not realistic. And so I know a lot of folks, including my children, that are kind of like, well, I'm not a success because I don't have a home. And I have to say that we need to undo that thinking. Your success is not predicated on if you own a home or not.
Yeah.
And now Colin's saying even owning a home isn't necessarily the smartest investment to do. There's other things that you can put your money into, which we're going to get to in just a second here, that can allow you to build up some wealth. So then you can end up buying these apartments, and then, or other kind of forms of real estate that allow you to get into the home that you want to be in, and let these other investments work for you, so then you're not stuck, so to speak, in just your residential property. Now, I mentioned some of these other forms of investments.
Right.